All right, I've got my design pinned down. I've used at least 6 pins. I am knotting my needle and thread. And I'm going to start sewing in a place that doesn't stab my fingers the most. So you can see I've put all my pins facing the same direction. My label is already sewn to the back. I'm going to start right here. I've got a knot in my thread. I want to hide the knot. I want this to look as neat as possible when I'm done. So I'm going to hide the knot by starting on the back of my design and bringing the needle forward to the front. Now I could go around and draw a 1/4 inch seam line all around the edges of this block. If you think that would help you sew this together, please do so. There's a reason I'm not. Some of you might like your design enough that you don't want to write on it with pen or pencil. You want to just have the fabric speak for itself, which would be my preference as a quilter. So what I'm going to do instead is applique about a 1/4 inch from the edge all the way around, just using my eyeballs to guess that 1/4 inch distance. So I've taken my back stitch, I've got my knot in, and I've taken my first 2 1/8 of an inch stitches, just about a 1/4 inch. At this point, you've been sewing a lot of 1/4 inch seams, so I think this is a good opportunity for you to practice guessing that 1/4 inch distance from the edge. If you get too close to an 1/8 of an inch from the edge, that's okay, but if you get closer than that, you're probably going to start fraying the edge of the fabric and it's not going to hold your design onto the block. So I would stay between a 1/4 inch and an 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around. Sometimes if you have a real bulky seam, you might not be able to do a 1/8 of an inch stitch, and that is a good example of a time where I might remove this pin that's in the way and take a back stitch as I'm stitching. So we do a back stitch at the beginning and end of every stitch. It's okay to do one once in a while in the middle, just to anchor your stitch or fix a mistake, or hold something down that might be extra bulky, which is why I'm doing it here. There's 4 layers of fabric here, so I'm just stitching it down a little extra. I can rock my needle back and forth to take 3 or 4 stitches at a time, so that saves a little time, and it tends to make the stitches look a little neater too. You can use your left hand to hold the fabric while you sew with your right, and that might also help you sew these stitches a little quicker. Every time I go around a corner, I'm going to take a little tiny back stitch just to hold my stitches in place, and then I'm going to keep going. And every time I get to a pin, I take the pin out and put it in my pin cushion. I've unthreaded my needle, no problem. See if I can get it back on there. This thread might fray really easily while you're sewing with it, so you make it easier to rethread your needle. You clip that end whenever it gets a little fuzzy or frayed, and then you'll have a nice sharp end to thread with. Back stitching at my corner as I go around another corner. You definitely want to make sure you're going through all the layers, which the pins should help you do, but you can check once in a while and see if you see your stitching line there too. I'm going to rotate this as I go. If your stitches aren't exactly an 1/8 of an inch long, that's okay, but you definitely want to aim for smaller rather than bigger. So some of mine are actually getting a little smaller than an 1/8 of an inch. When they get bigger, it's a little bit easier to snag or pull apart, and your block just won't stay together as well. This corner I'm going to back stitch again. And this I've turned under this edge to keep it nice and neat, and the pin is keeping that edge turned under while I work. Move this pin as I get to the sewing part of it. Taking a little back stitch at this bulky seam. And I'm almost there, maybe halfway. I probably could have used that pin to stay in here a little bit longer. A little back stitch at this corner. Everything I'm calling a corner is where the pieces are joined, and I've changed the direction of the applique outline stitch. So you can see I'm slowly outlining this block as I stitch it down 1/4 inch all the way around. Don't want to miss part of it because that part is going to fall off. Take my back stitch here. Sometimes if you run out of thread, you might want to tie your knot fully on the back side of your background square. That is also okay. I think I've got a little bit more room. Take out this pin and go a little further. Back stitch at the corner and then continue all the way around. Oh, here I am. I said you could go between 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch, and I turned my corner a little bit too soon. You can see I am a little bit less than 1/4 inch. I'm closer to 1/8 of an inch, but I'm still within my tolerance. I don't think that's going to come out. I am, however, starting to get short on thread. I've only got, maybe I said 4 inches left. I've got a little bit more than 4 inches. I'm going to take a back stitch here, tie my knot on the back, and get a new piece of thread. You can tie it on the back, loop it around just like we did when we were piecing under the last stitch to make a square knot, and now that it's knotted, you can clip that thread, get a new piece of thread. Once you get your new piece of thread, make sure if you're using the bobbin instead of the card to get a clean piece of thread off and put that bobbin minder back on before you drop your bobbin and spend a lot of time picking up thread. All right. Thread my needle, knot my needle, and keep going. I'm filming all this because I'm hoping to high speed it. I don't know if I'll get to that or not, but if I do, I'm even looking forward to seeing how fast this winds up being. All right, where was my knot? My knot was right here, so I'm going to come up next to the place that I stopped sewing, right there, and finish. Am I halfway? I'm more than halfway. Let's cruise. Another back stitch, forward stitch. Another reason these 1/8 of an inch stitches are important is for neatness. So on a contrasting block like this one that's kind of dark, you're going to see the stitches, and it's really nice if the stitches are even and the same spacing. I'm not sure why, that's just an aesthetic quilters like, but I like it, and you might like it too. If you don't care, you don't have to worry about it. You just want to take enough stitches that this stays on the fabric and doesn't fall off. I'm also a little too close to the edge. that's okay. I'll do my 1/4 inch on the last part. Take my pin out. Back stitch at the corner. And then I think this is my last 2 pieces right here. And this is my last pin. Those stitches are a little bit too big, so you can always switch before you get your needle through them. But if you have a couple that are a little bit closer to a 1/4 inch than 1/8 of an inch, that's probably okay. You just want to aim for smaller than a 1/4 inch. And 1/8 of an inch is a really convenient size because it's half. I can take my back stitch at this last kern. And here we go. Home stretch. This is a long enough seam, and the hypotenuse tends to be a little stretchier, so I'm going to take a back stitch, or maybe even 2 before I get to the end. All right, and when I get to the end, I'm going to back stitch right here, and then go to the back, tie my knot, and I tie the knot by going under the previous stitch to make a square knot, and then going under again. Sometimes I'll even do a second one if I think it needs a little extra strength, or I just want to be really sure I can find the knot later in case I need to pick up and do another stitch. In this case, we're done. And there's my knot. Clip that thread. If you still have more sewing to do, you want to weave that needle into your project somewhere so that it doesn't get lost, and put your bobbin, your pins, and your project back into your project bag. But here we go.